To continue, let us discuss about public expenditure and its meaning and importance. So remember that the expenses incurred by the government for the maintenance, preservation, and most likely the welfare of the economy is referred to us as public expenditures. So when we say public expenditure, it is for the satisfaction. Remember that the satisfaction of the needs of the citizens and for the promotion of economic and social welfare. So basically, the public expenditure is for development. And when we say development, that should be sustainable in the aspect of education, public health, social security, irrigation, drainage, and a lot more. So public expenditure is nothing but these developmental functions because of course our main purpose is to alleviate, meaning to make the lives of the citizens of the Philippines a better than before. So this public expenditure is very significant as it encompasses economic activities of the state and of course the nature and volume of public expenditure that shall have a great effect to the economic life of the country. Before, we have this laissez-faire era. It's about letting the public do what they want. The functions assigned to the state, meaning the function of the government is very minimal, and there is least interference, or that the government is best, which spends the least. So kung gamay ang gasto, according to laissez-faire, the government is at its best. So according to the classical school led by Adam Smith, it restricted the functions of the state to nasa yung functions sa state para sa justice, police and arms. They consider that if the government will expend money, it's wasteful, gasto-gasto ra daw, and that money could be used much well by private persons. So, according to Adam Smith in his book, The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776, so nalanday tulo ka buok main duties ang government to protect the society, to protect against injustice, and erecting and maintenance of certain public works. So, ingon si David Ricardo na if you want a peaceful government, dapat i-reduce daw ang budget. But remember, in recent time, dili na siya applicable because public expenditure has enormously increased. And considering na the-increase man ang ato ang public expenditure, the functions of the government has also increased. So ang modern karon sa una that is laissez-faire. Karon, the modern government are no more police. Dili lang sila police government, but they are more considered as welfare government. In today's time, the government has many activities such as to secure a reallocation of resources, distribution activities, stabilizing activities, and commercial activities. Meaning, these activities are intended to be done efficiently and completely for the economic growth and development of the society. So what are the causes nga naman nag-increase man? What are the causes? Why do we increase our public expenditure? Number one is for welfare. So modern governments are no more police governments. They need to look into the welfare of the mass or of the society or of the community. So dira kailangan nato og dako kay na expenditure for it to be realized. Defense is very important for a certain country to secure its sovereignty. Meaning modern warfare is very expensive. So possibilities of war, possibilities of having a kanang war against countries, it may happen. And how do we arm ourselves? So we need to also invest in defense. There is growth and democracy. So the conduct of elections, maintenance of democratic institutions like legislators can cause great expenditures. Even the population has something to do with the increase of expenditure. So the more people, the more people that the higher the population, the more people that we need to what serve. The need for the growing population needs more educational institutions, more food supply, more hospitals, di ba? In this at these times, we need a lot of hospitals that would cater COVID patients. So and even roads and other amenities of life. Also, the rising of the price levels. So in order for us to what um, consider the rising of the prices. So pag mataas ang presyo, that would mean also increase in the payment of salaries, increase sa pagpalit sa mga goods and services. So in order for us to pay for those, then we need to increase as we increase the level of the prices. Development expenditure, para asa man, meaning as again, as I mentioned, the build program. Bayad sa utang is also one of the reasons why we need to increase our public expenditures for us to pay the interest and the principal. And basically, the the one of the major causes as well is the poverty alleviation programs. We need to implement alleviation programs in order to make the life of the Filipinos easier, convenient, accessible, and way better than before. So the major current operating expenditures of the national government. Let me state this by having these two important expenditures of the government. So basically, public or government expenditures are generally classified into two categories. Number one is the capital expenditure or outlays. Number two is the what? Current operating expenditures. So when we say capital expenditure, so duha lang to ha. Number one, capital expenditure. Number two, current operating expenditure. So once we say capital expenditure, these are expenses whose usefulness lasts for more than 1 year and which add to the assets of the government. Pero once we say current operating expenditures, matunga siya sa duha. Either personal services and the other one is the maintenance and other operating expenses or MOOE. So as I've mentioned, these capital outlays of the national government basically are the usefulness of it lasts more than a year. So example to that are the infrastructure outlays, meaning the building of the roads, ports, airports, equity contributions to government corporations. Um, Once we say equity contributions, the government invest to government-owned and controlled corporations to secure the ownership of these GOCCs. We also consider the capital transfers to local government units, so kanang IRA, kanang internal revenue allotment that is being used by the LGUs for their development projects and other um, capital outlays such as the land acquisition and improvement, and so on and so forth. Remember that capital expenditures, it's about the multiplier effect. Multiplier in the sense that um, when we have capital expenditures, it makes our life even more convenient. Like for example, if if we have a better transportation, then the transportation cost of goods and commodities will be lessened. Remember na ang transportation is added to the cost of a certain product. So pag mogamay ang transportation expense because we have now a better infrastructure towards transportation, then there could be lowering of the prices of the commodities. So if lowered siya, meaning mas more ang capacity sa tao na mo disburse og kwarta. And that would mean alleviation of poverty, meaning daghag effect ang capital outlays. mga unsa pa man ang mga ginabayran sa atong government. So because 'di ba, as I've told you, the government may opt to have borrowings should the revenue being raised by the government is not enough to suffice the public expenditure. So kay naman tayo utang, then we need to pay for interest together with its principal. So our national government budget allocates also many sectors. So we allocate for social service, para sa education, culture, manpower, and development. Also for economic services. Kanang economic means communication, roads, and transportation facilities. Katong sa about sa agriculture, water, and power and energy, and tourism. Expenditures on defense. That's very sabotable for national security, stability, and peace. And then the general public services. So once we say general public, these are the general administration, such as general government stipulation fiscal affairs, and public order and safety, including various pertaining to law enforcement, maintenance of public order, and safety. So these are the national government budget sectoral allocation. So once we say public expenditures, we need to know the canons of public administration, meaning these are fundamental rules which govern public expenditure policy of the government. So according to Alfred Butler, he is a professor in finance, public finance in Morton School of Finance at the University of Pennsylvania. So down ana siya giingon na public expenditures promote welfare. Careful judgment should be exercised by the public authority to ensure that the advantages of the public should exceed the cost, meaning benefit over cost. Public expenditure should be utilized in the order of priority of welfare. That um, that means that we need to prioritize expenditures depending on what is our priority for the general public to have a better life. So we discussed first the canon of benefit. So basically, this canon is about the maximum social advantage, meaning the expenditure should be for the greater good of everyone. Canon of economy, it means that we need to be economical in spending money. It should not spend more money than the necessary amount on items of expenditure, meaning we are to be economical because the 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 fund that we have comes from the public, meaning as much as possible we need to lower the cost of expenditure while maximizing the budget that has been appropriated for a certain government agency. Canon of sanction, it means that no expenditure should be incurred without the proper approval of the sanctioning authority. It means that public expenditure should be approved by the head of the agency. Canon of productivity is about the efficiency, the efficiency of the people. So once we expend money for a certain development activity, that would mean maximum production, employment, and income. Canon of elasticity, there should be flexibility in the government expenditures. So whenever there is a need for us to change the condition, especially like for example in today's time, we need to amend, we need to divert our funds to a more fruitful and more reasonable grounds of expenditures such as the expenditures for the COVID-19. So that's an example of the government expenditure being flexible. Canon of equality. So ang kanisa na canon, the benefit of public expenditure should confer more on the poorer section of the society. Meaning, we are inclusive in nature. We alleviate more to those people who are at the what itong muna sa mga kanang laylayan. So kanang mga taong the poorest of the poor should be given much priority as we intend to alleviate poverty at all cost. This is the COA Circular 2012-001 dated June 14, 2012. So this is about prescribing the revised guidelines and documentary requirements for common government transactions. So in this circular, this is about the kanang mga usual na government expenditures na ginagastuan and has been appropriated by a certain budget from the government. So in here, so makita nato dito sa table of contents that there are disbursements of each type na gina-consider nato. So cash advance, kanang fund transfers to non-government organizations, people organization, fund transfer. So kana sila tanan, salary, allowances, honoraria. So this COA circular is about the proper disbursement of a certain expenditure, a certain public expenditure. So dili nato ni siya discuss tanan. What I would like to emphasize is that um, there is the general requirement. So na ay general requirement para sa disbursement. Number one, certificate of availability of fund. Na dapat na ay pundo, na ay fund for a certain expenditure as certified by the chief accountant. Remember as well that it should be lawful and sufficient. Then there should be sufficient allotment na para sa isa ka kanang expenditure and duly certified by authorized officials. The legality of the transactions, it should conform with laws and regulations, and there should be approval of the head of agency and documented ang iyahang mga supporting evidences to establish the validity of the claim. So like for example, so let's have an example. Cash advances, granting of cash advance. So kani siya, this refers to the rules na kailangan na the basic rules na kailangan to i-consider pag ang isa ka expenditure is about cash advance. So example to that is example, no additional cash advance shall be allowed to any official or employee unless the previous cash advance given to him is first liquidated and accounted for in the books. So that means that cash advances, once it's granted, before it is granted, whenever there is a prior cash advance, dapat maliquidate sa daw. Or walay cash advance na gamiton for infrastructure or project basis. And then, dapat to katong only permanent appointed officials. Dili pwede ang elected officials, pero only for official traveling expense. This is what I would like to emphasize, that for common to all cash advances, dapat kani sila is makitaan, kani sila is kanang available as an attachment to the disbursement voucher of a certain government agency. So dapat na authority of the accountable officer issued by the head of the agency, certification from the accountant na ang cash advance before has been liquidated, tapos the band na-band ang anyone na nag-cash advance. So, that's it. So, ato lang i-scroll down, traveling allowance. So, unsa man ang mga basic guidelines pag naay allowance na ihatag sa isa ka empleyado sa government. So, nadira, mo ni siya ang ato ang mga requirements, mo ni siya ang mga attachments, and so on and so forth. Another, let me emphasize example kani. Salaries, wages, allowances, honoraria, and other similar payments should be what? Liquidated within five calendar days after the end of the pay period. Meaning, these are rules and regulations that we need to follow because that is basically mandated by the government. So, kana mga minimum requirements na kailangan natong i-comply. And when we deviate from these minimum general guidelines, then that would mean what? That would mean that the person responsible for it shall be held accountable. So ato lang nang scroll. So that's it. So taas pa kayo na daghan kayo nagkanang for a certain kind of transaction there is a corresponding document, bulleted items that we need to consider as an attachment for that disbursement. So that's it. Another thing, this is the COA Circular 2012-003. So this is about the guidelines for the prevention and disallowance of irregular, unnecessary, excessive, extravagant, and unconscionable expenditure. So we have a separate discussion for it. I would just like to emphasize that kani siya ang ato ang expenditure naa siya kanang certain level of description if it's illegal or if it's excessive or unnecessary. So makit-an dira na nata example diri ako lang baba lang ha. Um, so these are the definition. So definition of unnecessary, definition of excessive, definition of kanus aman siya extravagant, kanus aman siya inani unconscionable expenditure. So let me go directly to the sample. So we have Annex A. So cases that we can consider as irregular expenditure. So, mo ni siya mga example hantod sa maabot ta sa Annex B, still illegal expenditures. So, irregular lang gihapon na siya. So, na siya mga example. Kanus ana to ma-consider. Another is Annex C. Kanus aman siya unnecessary. So, example to that is kanang mag-hire ka og consultant na naa naman untay kanang hired na siya daan or concerned official or employee of the government already hired na mag-redundant kung mag-hire pa ka og consultant. So, dili na necessary na mag-hire pa og consultant. So, muna yung mga example. Kanus siya excessive. So, these are the examples and then extravagant pa niya. Extravagant ka na makulit kag wine, liquor, sigarilyo. Pero naa siya yung mga exceptions. Especially when it's about international conferences. So, that's extravagant. Kanus siya unconscionable. So, these are the examples. So, that basically is our discussion for public expenditures. Good day.